At the end of every brutal dry season in the heart of Australia, one of the most ruthless acts of survival plays out beneath the baking soil of the outback. A mother, having spent months single-handedly engineering a fortress to protect her bloodline, is suddenly and systematically driven out, bitten, and abandoned by her own flesh and blood. It looks like a betrayal, an ungrateful mutiny by a generation she sacrificed everything to raise. But in the uncompromising theatre of Australian wildlife, this isn't a tragedy. It is the exact cold-blooded climax she was working toward since the very first drops of the autumn rain. Today, we are pulling back the leaf litter to uncover the complete, untold epic of the short-beaked echidna, Tachyglossus aculeatus, tracking a solitary life from its first gasps of air in a subterranean nursery to this startling seasonal eviction. Along the way, you will encounter a creature that defies the rules of modern biology, shattering everything you thought you knew about this spiked icon of the bush. When most people think of the echidna, they picture a slow, comical pincushion waddling across a dirt track in the national park, maybe digging for a few ants before rolling into a defensive ball. But if you scratch beneath that prickly surface, you find an evolutionary masterpiece with a lineage that makes humanity look like a historical afterthought. Echidnas, as part of the ancient order of monotremes, have been refining their craft on the Australian continent for millions of years, navigating ice ages, shifting tectonic plates, and catastrophic bushfires. While our own species has been walking the Earth for a mere fraction of geological time, the ancestors of these egg-laying mammals were already engineering the soils of Australia, quietly holding ecosystems together underfoot. Today, science recognises 4 distinct subspecies of the short-beaked echidna spread across every conceivable corner of Australia, from the dense, wet forests of tropical North Queensland and the rugged wilderness of Tasmania, to the scorched expanse of the Red Centre and the high alpine regions of the Snowy Mountains. They are found at sea level along the windswept coastal dunes and high up on rocky escarpments over 2,000 metres above the ocean, proving that this animal is a supreme master of adaptation. Visually, an echidna might invite a casual comparison to a porcupine or a hedgehog, but that is a complete evolutionary illusion. An adult short-beaked echidna is an intricate mosaic of survival gear, measuring up to 45 centimetres in length and weighing anywhere between 2 and 7 kilograms. With Tasmanian individuals typically tracking much larger than their mainland cousins. The first thing that commands your attention is the coat of formidable spines, which are actually modified hairs made of keratin, anchoring deep into a powerful muscle layer underneath the skin. But look closer between those spikes, and you will find a thick insulating layer of dark fur. In Australia, where the weather can swing from a sub-zero alpine blizzard to a 45-degree desert scorcher in a matter of months, this dual-layered coat acts as an advanced thermal shield. This brings us to the extraordinary internal engine of the echidna, a biological marvel that challenges the very definition of what it means to be a mammal. Unlike standard placental mammals that maintain a high, constant internal temperature, the echidna operates on a remarkably low and flexible metabolic thermostat, usually sitting around just 32 degrees. They cannot sweat and they cannot pant to cool down. Instead, they manage their temperature by adjusting their behaviour, becoming strictly nocturnal when the fierce summer sun bakes the Australian outback, or supercharging their internal heat by rapidly contracting their deep muscle layers. This low-energy blueprint allows them to survive on an absolute minimum of resources, letting them exploit niches across Australia that would leave other mammals starved or dehydrated. But it is the arrival of the southern winter that truly sets the stage for the most harrowing chapter of their existence. As May turns to June and the frost settles over the southern woodlands of Australia, the abundant termite mounds bake hard as concrete, and the insect life vanishes into the deep earth. For the solitary echidna, the banquet is officially over. Facing months of absolute scarcity, the animal does something rare for an Australian mammal. It enters a state of profound torpor, a deep, cyclical hibernation. Retreating into a specially excavated chamber, buried deep beneath the roots of a fallen eucalyptus or nestled within a hollow log, the echidna shuts down its system. Its body temperature plummets, sometimes dropping to a staggering 5 degrees, matching the chilly ambient temperature of the surrounding soil. Its heart rate drops from a standard 50 beats per minute down to a mere 4 or 5, and it breathes just once every few minutes. For up to 4 months, this living stone remains frozen in time, buried in the Australian dirt. Completely cut off from the world above, there is no communal warmth, no stored hoard of food, and no partner to share the burden. It is an absolute, isolated gamble against the elements. If the winter rains turn into a catastrophic flash flood, drowning the low-lying burrows, or if an intense early-season bushfire roars through the topsoil, the hibernating echidna can be lost entirely. Yet, their resilience is legendary. Recent field studies conducted by biologists in the rugged terrain of New South Wales revealed that echidnas possess an astonishing capacity to survive low-oxygen environments during these deep subterranean slumbers, a physiological trait that allows them to endure weeks trapped under compacted, waterlogged soil that would suffocate almost any other creature. Then, around July or August, as the subtle tilt of the planet brings the first hints of warmth to the southern hemisphere, a silent alarm goes off within the earth. The soil begins to warm, the frozen fat reserves melt, and from the dark depths of the Australian bush, the matriarch emerges, battered, lean, but profoundly alive, ready to initiate a cycle of life that will demand everything she has left to give. Emerging into the brittle winter sunlight of the Australian bush, the female echidna is a creature driven by pure biological urgency. Her 6-month fast has stripped her of significant body mass, and her immediate priority should be feeding. Yet, the seasonal clock on the Australian continent ticks fast, and before she can even begin to rebuild her fat reserves, she is swept into one of the most bizarre and chaotic courtship rituals found anywhere in the natural world. Echidnas do not mate in private. Instead, they form what naturalists call an echidna train. A single, receptive female moving through the undergrowth leaves behind a subtle chemical trail, and within days, every unattached male in the territory locks onto her signal. What follows is a slow-motion, single-file parade that can last for up to 6 weeks. A train can consist of anywhere from 2 to over a dozen hopeful suitors, tracking her every move through the dense bracken, across dry billabongs, and over fallen logs in a relentless test of endurance. The males march nose to tail, completely ignoring food and safety, consumed entirely by the drive to pass on their genetics. This procession winds across the Australian landscape until the female decides the marathon is over. She halts near a large tree or fallen log and digs her front claws firmly into the dirt. What happens next is a masterclass in tactical persistence. The males do not fight each other with teeth or claws. Instead, they begin to dig a circular trench right around the female, clearing out the soil until she is left stranded on a small central island of earth. Once the arena is prepared, the suitors engage in a gentle but determined wrestling match, using their powerful shoulders to push and shove each other out of the trench. The last male remaining in the ring wins the right to approach the female. Because monotremes possess a single opening for waste and reproduction, the cloaca, the physical act of mating, requires incredible precision, especially given the formidable barrier of sharp spikes. The male must carefully navigate her defensive armor, using his unique four-headed anatomy to achieve fertilization before the pair separates forever. There are no pair bonds formed here. The male waddles away to find another train, leaving the female entirely alone to face the monumental challenge of bringing the next generation into Australia. About 3 weeks after this exhausting ritual, a profound transformation occurs within the female's body. Unlike almost all other modern mammals inhabiting Australia, the echidna does not give birth to live young, nor does she possess a permanent pouch like a kangaroo or a wombat. Instead, her abdominal muscles contract, drawing the skin on her belly inward to create a temporary, muscular fold, a makeshift nursery designed for a single purpose. She then lays a single soft-shelled egg directly into this dynamic pocket. The egg is tiny, barely the size of a grape, weighing less than 2 grams and protected by a leathery, parchment-like membrane rather than a hard shell. For 10 days, the mother carries this precious cargo everywhere she goes, keeping her belly pressed close to the earth to shield it from the sharp, unpredictable changes of the Australian weather. She cannot afford a single mistake. If she slips down a steep embankment or allows her core temperature to fluctuate wildly, the fragile life inside will perish. When the incubation period ends, the egg does not shatter, it tears open, using a tiny, specialized egg tooth on its snout, a primitive evolutionary tool shared with reptiles and birds. The hatchling rips through the leathery membrane and crawls out into the warmth of the temporary pouch. This newborn creature, known to science as a puggle, is one of the most helpless entities in the animal kingdom. It is completely blind, hairless, and translucent, measuring barely 15 millimeters long, about the size of a single jelly bean. It has no developed hind legs, relying entirely on its surprisingly strong forelimbs to grip the mother's skin. Inside the dark safety of the abdominal fold, the puggle faces its first major hurdle: survival in a world without nipples. Because echidnas split from the mainstream mammalian lineage millions of years ago, they never evolved the specialized mammary structures seen in placental animals or marsupials. Instead, the mother's milk glands secrete nutrients directly through specialized patches of skin on her abdomen, known as milk areolae. The tiny puggle must spend hours actively lapping up the rich, pinkish milk as it oozes directly from the mother's paws. This fluid is a biological powerhouse, exceptionally high in iron and fats, specifically formulated to trigger rapid growth. For the next 2 months, the mother carries her growing passenger through the rugged terrain of Australia. But as the puggle expands, it begins to undergo a dramatic change that signals the end of this mobile arrangement. By October, the puggle's soft skin begins to sprout the unmistakable nubs of its first true spikes. Carrying a sharp, prickly ball inside a sensitive abdominal fold quickly becomes an unbearable proposition for the mother. The time has come to transition from a mobile nursery to a stationary fortress, setting in motion the final, high-stakes phase of the reproductive cycle that will test the absolute limits of her maternal instinct. By the time the warm October winds begin to sweep across the eucalyptus woodlands of Australia, the mother echidna faces a critical logistical crisis. The puggle in her pouch has grown into a hefty, sharp-spiked bundle weighing nearly half a kilogram. Every step she takes through the thick bracken causes those fresh, needle-like tips to dig straight into her sensitive abdominal skin. She can no longer carry this prickly passenger on her daily foraging loops. To ensure its survival while she hunts, she must construct a secure subterranean sanctuary, a dedicated nursery burrow designed to withstand both the fluctuating climate of Australia and the sharp eyes of native predators, choosing a site with meticulous care, usually beneath the heavy, binding root system of an ancient grass tree or deep inside the hollow core of a fallen log. The mother begins to dig. Using her spade-like front claws, which are rotated backwards to scoop out huge volumes of earth, she excavates a narrow tunnel extending up to a metre into the dark soil, culminating in a rounded, insulated nursery chamber. She lines this nest with a soft mattress of shredded bark, dried leaves and grass, creating a climate-controlled bunker. Once the infrastructure is complete, she gently transfers the puggle from her belly fold into the nest. What follows is an extraordinary display of extreme maternal trust and isolation. As the mother turns to leave the burrow to find food, she doesn't just walk out. She intentionally seals the entrance behind her. Using her hind legs, she backfills the tunnel with a thick plug of compacted dirt, completely erasing any visual trace of the burrow from the surface. To a passing dingo, a foraging goanna, or an introduced fox, this patch of ground looks entirely undisturbed. For the next 5 to 6 months, the young puggle will spend the vast majority of its life trapped in absolute darkness, buried alive in the Australian earth, waiting in total silence for its mother's return. This strategy requires a monumental sacrifice from the female. Because she must travel further and hunt harder across the changing seasonal landscape of Australia to produce her exceptionally rich milk, she only returns to the nursery burrow once every 5 to 6 days. When she arrives back at the hidden site, she uses her powerful claws to systematically clear the dirt plug, enters the dark chamber, and allows the ravenous puggle to gorge itself. Because the visits are so infrequent, the puggle must consume up to 20% of its own body weight in a single, frantic feeding session that lasts less than an hour. The mother's milk at this stage is a concentrated elixir, so dense with fats and proteins that it looks more like thick cream than liquid milk. providing the infant with enough sustained energy to survive the next 5 days of solitary confinement. As the summer heat intensifies across the Australian continent through January and February, the demands on the mother reach a crushing peak. The baked topsoil makes breaking into termite mounds a grueling, exhausting task. She must use her highly specialised, long snout, which is packed with thousands of microscopic electroreceptors similar to those of a platypus, to detect the faint electrical signals emitted by moving insects deep within the earth. Once a nest is located, she drives her snout into the soil and deploys her remarkable tongue, which can extend 18 centimetres from her mouth and is coated in an incredibly sticky salivary mucus. Moving at a lightning-fast speed of up to 100 strokes per minute, her tongue vacuums up thousands of ants and termites in seconds, avoiding the worst of their defensive bites. Yet, even with this advanced hunting gear, the sheer volume of calories required to sustain both herself and her rapidly expanding offspring pushes her to the edge of physical exhaustion. She is constantly balancing on a knife edge of survival, navigating an ecosystem where resources are strictly rationed by the climate. Every journey back to the nursery burrow strips away more of her own bodily reserves, her spikes losing their luster and her fat stores depleting to dangerous lows. She is pouring every remaining ounce of her life force into that dark underground chamber, completely unaware that the infant she is sustaining is slowly transforming into her ultimate adversary. By the arrival of April, the golden autumn light brings a dramatic shift to the temperate woodlands of Australia. Inside the dark nursery burrow, the young echidna has transformed from a helpless, jelly bean-sized hatchling into a fully formed, independent creature equipped with its own array of formidable armour. Weighing nearly 2 kilograms, its ravenous appetite can no longer be satisfied by the mother's infrequent visits. The crowded subterranean chamber has become a pressure cooker of resource competition. When the exhausted female digs through the compacted earth plug for her final seasonal visit, she enters a trap of her own making. The juvenile, driven by pure instinct and an overwhelming demand for nutrients, aggressively corners her. It lunges forward, using its sharp new spikes and heavy forelimbs to repeatedly ram, nudge, and bite at her sensitive, unarmoured underbelly. It is a relentless physical eviction. The mother, depleted of her fat reserves and physically spent after a year of continuous sacrifice, offers no resistance. She backs out of the tunnel, leaving the fortress entirely to her offspring, and waddles out into the Australian bush alone. This isn't an act of cruelty, it is the ultimate, necessary detachment that ensures the survival of the bloodline across the unforgiving Australian continent. For wildlife filmmakers and researchers documenting these sensitive chapters of Australian ecology. Capturing these subterranean milestones demands a strict code of observation ethics. Because echidnas are highly susceptible to stress, which can cause a mother to permanently abandon her nursery burrow or induce dangerous metabolic spikes during torpor, modern scientists rely strictly on non-invasive technology. Researchers across Australia use remote, infrared trail cameras concealed in the leaf litter and microbore fiberscopes slipped carefully through natural fissures in the soil, ensuring the animals remain entirely unaware of human presence. This respectful, hands-off methodology allows us to learn from these ancient monotremes without disrupting the delicate behavioural balances that have kept them alive for millions of years. As the independent juvenile finally emerges from the burrow to explore the vast expanse of Australia, it carries forward a legacy 38 million years in the making. The mother will spend the coming winter months in deep isolation, quietly rebuilding her strength beneath the roots of the eucalyptus trees, ready to restart the great cycle when the earth warms once more. The short-beaked Echidna remains a living testament to resilience, a quiet, spiked architect of the soil,